All true crime stories, whether recent or decades old, deserve to be solved. And yet these strange top 5 true crime mysteries continue to baffle experts years later. Unsolved cases are oftentimes a single shred of crime scene evidence away from getting answered. Will the true story behind these unexplained events ever emerge? Number 5. The unsolved mystery of Aina Langstaff surrounds a kind and clever 24-year-old woman with ambitions to work in Europe. Someone tragically took her life in 1987, and we may never know the true story as her crime case has never been solved. Aina had skipped the final year of high school and gone to study at Northern Arizona University. She wanted to someday work in the US Embassy in France, but was living in Flagstaff, Arizona at the time of the crime. She lived with a roommate and her cat in an apartment complex on Tucson Avenue. On the morning of November 7, 1987, police were called to the apartment complex to check for a gas leak. Some gas meters had sustained car damage in the apartment complex parking area. The incident was being treated as a criminal investigation because it looked like a vehicle had fled the scene shortly afterwards. After no gas leak was detected, the police were eventually called back hours later when a resident discovered Aina's body a mere 100 feet away from the damaged gas meters. She had met an unexpected ending between a parked car and a wall. At first, police believed a vehicle had done this to her, perhaps even the same driver who had damaged the gas meters. But marks on her body showed a sharp object had been used by the criminal responsible. Somehow, the police did not notice her the first time they were called out. It's possible that police had simply overlooked her, but it's unlikely given how close she was to where they were investigating. Police went door to door for information to help get the crime mystery solved. Aina's roommate said that she left the apartment between 11 and 11:30 p.m. to walk her cat. Her roommate claimed Aina never made it home. Given the body was found just after 8 a.m., police were looking at a 9-hour window in which the crime might have taken place. They believed Aina might have gone to a nearby party, but couldn't confirm if this story was true. Few other crime scene details about Aina's case investigation have been released to the public. 2 people were arrested early on, including a man who was suspected of taking the lives of 2 other people in California the December after Aina lost her life. But none were ever charged, and police had no evidence either was involved. The mysterious case has remained unsolved ever since. Number 4. In September of 1975, the body of a young woman was found after spending weeks in a side canyon of the Little Colorado River. Later that October, she would be identified through dental records as Deborah Carter, a missing person who had an open investigation that had begun months ago in August. She was found at the bottom of a cliff and could have slipped, but as soon as some of her belongings turned up miles away in California, investigators knew the sharp blow to her head was deliberate. They recreated a timeline leading up to the unsolved mystery. In July, Deborah had left her parents' home in Maryland to travel to California with her boyfriend for an August wedding. After 2 weeks of hitchhiking between bus rides, the two parted ways on August 2nd. The next couple of weeks are well documented by travel diaries and phone calls home. Deborah got to visit many of the national parks and met new people. At some point in South Dakota, she befriended a man named Vern, who she traveled with through a few more national parks before separating on August 16th, the last time Deborah would call home. Days before she went missing, she sounded normal as she told her sister about plans to go to the Grand Canyon with 3 French girls. The following day, August 17th, Deborah checked into the Flamingo Hotel in Flagstaff, Arizona, paying with traveler's checks. The next day, August 18th, she left for the Grand Canyon and disappeared. Her belongings were later found in Santa Rosa, California, in what was described as a white nylon bag, which may have been the inside of a sleeping bag. The bag was found just 30 miles away from Deborah's planned destination. Coincidentally, this site was also where the missing bodies of 4 other women were found. Like Deborah, their unsolved cases still need solving. Adding to the mystery behind the case were the traveler's checks. An unidentified man had been cashing in these checks, which were in Deborah's name, on September 2nd and 3rd. The first check was a forged signature that was cashed in Colorado. The man then traveled south with the last 3 checks being cashed in New Mexico. It seemed likely that the person responsible for taking Deborah's life and the person who cashed the checks weren't the same person, but neither has been identified. This true crime case remains unsolved. Number 3. The unsolved case of Joseph Elwell is one of the most mysterious types of true crime stories. Locked door mysteries. Joseph was found barely alive by his housekeeper, Marie Larson, at 9 a.m. on June 11, 1920, in his New York City home. He was sat in his armchair. There was a hole in his forehead, and the round landed on the coffee table. Its shell casing was on the floor along with the mail that he had been holding. All the doors leading to the house were locked. News of this strange and mysterious case quickly made headlines. His wife, Helen Derby Well, had separated from Joseph. Her ex-husband was an unfaithful 44-year-old womanizer who kept the contact details of over 50 women. Many of the women also had house keys. Investigators hoped to have the crime solved after finding this evidence at his home. They now had a long list of criminal suspects who had an opportunity to take Joseph's life. As a famous bridge player and a wealthy investor, Joseph certainly had his pick of women throughout the marriage. Could this mystery be explained by a jilted lover or one of the many angry husbands? If the criminal had let themselves in using a spare key and then left, then how was the door still locked from the inside? The more investigators prodded, the greater the mystery became. The prior evening, Joseph had gone to the Ritz-Carlton with his latest love interest, Viola Krause, and Viola's sister and brother-in-law, and they also watched a show at a New Amsterdam theater. Viola's ex-husband, Victor von Schlegel, had also been at the Ritz and the theater on that night. And there was a confrontation at the theater that Viola later said was nothing serious. Joseph returned home alone between 2 and 2:30 a.m. on the day of the crime. True to form, he took a phone call from Viola around this time, and then made a number of phone calls of his own. One was to his stables at 4:30 a.m., where he kept a number of racehorses. Naturally, there was nobody to answer the phone at this time, and it wasn't unusual for Joseph to make these middle-of-the-night calls. His last phone call was a little after 6 a.m. If their timeline was true, the crime had taken place sometime after 6:30 a.m. It wasn't long after this that he had been collecting his mail, the mail that was at his feet when he was discovered. Police also discovered 2 partial cigars in the room with Joseph. Since one was his favorite brand, and the other was a generic type that he would have never chosen, police did not know if he had a conversation or simply ignored the person in the house, though they could not figure out why he would do so while sorting through his mail. Today, the cigar would have been the key to solving this mystery through DNA evidence, but at the time, there was little evidence police could find. The case went cold and remains unanswered. Number 2. The true crime story of Leroy Carter Jr. is an unsolved mystery that may involve the occult. Leroy was a Vietnam homeless war veteran on the streets who was simply down on his luck, but in no way a hardened criminal. When his body turned up in Golden Gate Park on the morning of February 8, 1981, there were no obvious suspects. At the time, the Golden Gate Park was a popular spot for the homeless to spend a night or two. It was also not uncommon for bodies to be dumped there. But this strange case was deeply disturbing and unlike anything any of the police officers had seen before. Leroy's body was found in his sleeping bag in a secluded area near Alvord Lake. His head, however, was not. Protruding from the stump were 2 ears of corn and an entire chicken wing. The rest of the chicken was found 50 yards away. Leroy was identified using his fingerprints which were on criminal file due to petty misdemeanors, but that didn't offer any clues as to who the criminal responsible might be. Detective Sandy Gallant, who worked on the infamous Jonestown Massacre case, believed the head was being used for dark magic. After consulting with a specialist named Charles Wetley, who was a coroner, she learned of a cannibalistic ceremony that lasted 42 days. The final step, after its contents were consumed, was to return the head to where it was found. The police didn't believe this theory, and even Detective Gallant didn't find it very likely. But the case had an unexpected ending that is strange but true. The crime story concludes 42 days after Leroy's life was taken, at which point the missing head was found floating in the water, not far from where his body was found. Since no surveillance was set up at the location, police were unable to find new clues. It seems the only way this dark true crime might be solved is if someone comes forward with information more than 40 years later. Number 1. It was just before midnight on April 7, 1983, when two CB radio enthusiasts stumbled across a crime scene on the secluded Gypsy Brae in Edinburgh. Sheila Anderson was in the road and barely alive. She passed away en route to the hospital. What makes this unsolved case so strange is that she had been seen by police officers just half an hour earlier, alive and well. Sheila had once been a shy young woman with ambitions of becoming a nurse. She married young and soon had 2 sons. Then her mother passed away, and Sheila turned to various addictions to try to cope with the loss. Before long, she stole from her family, and then finally turned to walking the streets to earn money. She had developed a reputation with police. On more than one occasion, she had stood in front of a car when a client tried to leave without paying. What detectives thought was a hit and run had a more sinister motive, as the car had quite deliberately passed over her repeatedly. At the time, some police forces might not have investigated Sheila's case too seriously due to her occupation, but local police launched a full investigation and were confident they would be able to find the criminal quickly. But it turned out many of the women who were working the same streets as Sheila wouldn't talk to police. They were scared of police and took unnecessary risks. On 2 occasions, a woman called authorities to say she had information about the unsolved case, but both times she failed to attend a meeting with officers. Police did get some real evidence from the crime scene. They knew from paint scraps found on her body that the car was red, but that didn't provide any leads that brought police any closer to solving the crime. In 2009, police were able to create a DNA profile from a sample taken from Sheila's body. It did not match anybody in the system, but with the advancement of genetic genealogy, this is one case that at least someday might be solved. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.